What is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and judging by the thumbnail, we got a fun one today. I have been asked so many times, why and how did you swap your dually pickup over to a single wheel? As most of you know by now, if you have been watching my channel for some time, my crew cab long bed single wheel 1-ton pickup was once upon a time a dually, and I swapped it into a single wheel. I will go over those reasons as to why I did that here in this video and how I did that. It's a pretty easy swap. It's not just as easy as swapping the wheels. There's a few things that you got to get, like a bed, or if you wanted to just rip the fenders off, you could put some fender flares on it and try to cover it up, but that's a little janky. So yeah, we will go over that, and I'm curious to see what the truck looks like with dually wheels. So let's get into it. So number one, if you are looking to swap your originally equipped single wheel to a dually, it is more difficult in order to do so. The rear axles on a dually are quite a bit wider in order to compensate for the dually setup. Also, the lug studs are just a little bit longer, and I'll show you that when we get to tearing the front end. But it is much easier to go from a dually starting point to a single wheel instead of vice versa. It's a little more cumbersome, and you don't have the GVWR that you would if you started out with a already dually or a 1-ton pickup. It's not really cost effective to swap a 3/4 ton pickup to a 1-ton pickup. There's a few things pretty important things you got to change, especially if you're looking to use it as a commercial vehicle. The weight rating plays a very important part. So I like to start off with 1-ton pickups. That way I already have that higher GVWR and I'm not worried about if I ever want to swap my truck back to a dually in the future, which may or may not be happening. But I'm gonna do it a little differently. Again, we'll go over that here in just a sec. So I recommend getting a 1-ton dually pickup for starting out, not trying to swap a 3/4 ton to a dually. It's a little more difficult. You're going to spend a little more money, and you won't have the GVWR unless you go and re-register it that way. One of the reasons why I swapped my pickup that doesn't have its hood shut from a dually to a single wheel, number one is the cost of owning a dually versus a single wheel. By the time it was ready to have the tires replaced, I didn't want to have to buy 2 extra tires that I wasn't necessarily going to use at the time. I do quite a bit of hauling with my pickup. I haul a trailer once in a while, whenever I decide I need it. But for the weight that I haul, say a car trailer or anything like that, it's not necessarily needed that I have a dually. In the future, when I plan on going to other states and buying other vehicles, bringing them back and fixing them up to give you guys more videos, I want my truck to be a dually. It's just going to make towing more stable. I'm not necessarily going to worry about if the tires are going to give out or anything like that. But at the time that I swapped my truck from a single wheel to a dually, it wasn't necessarily needed, if you will. Another reason why I wanted to swap my truck from a dually to a single wheel was the wheels themselves are far more pricey and harder to come by in the private sale sector of Facebook Marketplace and Evil Bay and Craigslist and stuff like that, that I wanted. Now, that's not to say that you can't find dually wheels or you can't find the old stock, steelies for dualies, but I don't like my stuff stock. I like other people's, if they get a Pathbot truck or anything like that. I think it's cool as hell, but I personally can't leave anything stock because my mind goes crazy when I do so. So I found these Hilo, I forget the damn number of them, I'm sure I can find them, but these are Hilo single 8 lug wheels that I found on Facebook Marketplace for $200, and for me that was perfect. I use my truck, I don't need a show build or anything like that. These wheels served my aftermarket needs perfectly. So, and I was able, where they're a 20 by 10, I was able to find a set of tires for under $1,000 that were brand new, and I fell in love with this setup. Another reason why I swapped my dually to a single wheel was I don't like the standard dually steer axle wheels, and I can kind of show you that here. So this is wife's truck, of course, and I absolutely hate the offset of stock dually steer axle wheels. It's, to me, I just hate the amount of hub poke out from the tire itself. I would much rather have a single wheel on the steer axle, and that way everything is nice and tucked in and I don't have to worry about racking it off anything. Also, I don't like the way that the corresponding steer axle wheel looks comparative to the rear axle. So I absolutely love the way that the outside drive tire aluminum wheel looks, but I personally think that the corresponding steer axle wheel looks hideous. That's just my opinion. I know it's, the way, I know it's the exact same wheel, just, for the steer axle setup, that the rear wheel is, but I think that looks goofy, and to me that goes for all dually wheels. I haven't necessarily found a dually steer axle wheel that has that kind of poke on the outside, but again, that's just my personal opinion. Another reason why I swapped my my dually crew cab to a single wheel was finding aftermarket wheels to be vastly more expensive. So you got to think, if on a single rear wheel application, all of the wheels match. They're the exact same wheel. Of course, this is not including proper directional wheels. I'm just talking about, say, my Hilos. They all look exactly the same. They all have the very same part number. On a dually application, a lot of companies have designated position wheels. So, for example, the inside wheels, the ones that you're not going to see past the outside wheels, will primarily be steel. They do that to save costs, save time, and so on and so forth. The outside drive wheels or the outside rear wheels will be different from the steer wheels. So they look the same and they're designed to look the same, but on most aftermarket dually wheels, you can't swap the rear wheel to the front unless they're all steel wheels. I'll get into that and show you guys here in a sec about, I believe that same thing goes to say about my wife's truck. I'm not exactly positive, but I'm pretty sure that that doesn't mean you can't. And most wheels, most aftermarket wheels, especially newer companies and newer wheels, dually wheels come out. You can't swap from steer axle to drive axle. When you do tire rotations, you usually flip the two steer axles and you flip the drive positions. So unlike rotating regular steel dually wheels and stuff like that, you would take the outside, you would take the outside drive, you would take the inside drive, put it on the outside drive. You would take the outside drive, put it on the steer opposite side, the steer same side, and then you would take the steer axle tire and put it on the inside drive on the opposite side. So I know that's a little confusing, and that's just the way I've been taught. If somebody wants to inform me otherwise, then go right ahead, but that is the way I have been taught, and to rotate dually wheels so long as you can. So with the basically 3 different types of wheel on, say, my wife's truck, it is more part numbers, if you will. So you'll be having 2 steer axle wheels that are the same part number. You'll be having 2 outside drive wheels that are the same part number, and you'll have the 2 inside rear axle wheels the same part number. Whereas on my truck, where all the helos are the exact same, I have 1 part number. So if I ever bust a wheel, I can go try to find that part number. These are really old helos. I'm pretty positive they don't make new ones of these anymore. And these are old dually wheels, and I have absolutely no information other than these are ultras. I have no part number. If anybody can tell me exactly what these ultras are, I need another steer, because this one is, of course, steel. I would like to find a whole matching set. If I can't find that ultra steer wheel, I'll probably just find another aftermarket set. But yeah, dually wheels are harder and more expensive to come by, if you will. Yeah, so let's get into the fun part. Okay, so on the factory dually setup, you have a 4-inch wheel spacer on the steer axle, and this compensates for the offset of the steer axle dually wheel, so your tire rides directly in the middle where it needs to be. And that way you're not poking out any, or you're not super tucked in. If you were to get rid of that spacer and try to put the dually wheel back on, what's going to happen is the wheel is going to grind into your A-arms and you're not going to be able to bolt it up. If some of you are familiar with the 3/4 ton trucks, how the steer axle actually almost comes flush with the fender on the front, and then the rear axle or the drive axle is kind of tucked in a little bit. Well, almost the same, almost the opposite is to say about dually. The steer axle is much more narrow by about 2 inches on each side, so approximately 4 inches, and the rear axle is about 4 inches or 4 to 6 inches wider than a stock 3/4 ton pickup with a single rear wheel. The reason why I would recommend buy a dually first and decide whether you want to be a single wheel or just stick with a dually instead of going with a 3/4 ton or a single rear wheel 1 ton pickup is because you can't necessarily mount dually wheels onto one of the single rear wheel axles, or the rim will interfere with the brake drum. Now you can use a spacer. That's kind of a little hairy because you're only using about that much thread on the lug nuts, and I don't recommend it. Or even just getting longer lug studs. It's best to just start off with a dually. It's not really cost beneficial to start off with a single rear wheel and either buy a rear axle or try to figure out something in order to swap the rear wheels without the wheel interfering. So in order where the dually steer axles are more narrow than a 3/4 ton pickup, the way to correct removing the 4-inch spacer is to go with a 2-inch spacer, and that will line your wheels up perfectly in line with the rear axle. I do not use a spacer on the rear axle, and I'll show you that kind of what I was talking about earlier, where the rear axle is wider than a single rear axle. The hub actually sticks out about that much farther than a single rear wheel, approximately 2 inches on either side. But so my rear axle has as much poke as my steer axle with a 2-inch spacer. If you run without that 2-inch spacer, in my case, my steer axle wheels would be sucked in about 2 inches on either side, and my rear axle would look way wider than my steer axle. Alright, so the absolute easiest way I found to remove this 4-inch wheel spacer, again, this is for 4-wheel drive application. The 2-wheel drive dualies, this is all one piece. The 4-inch spacer is made onto the hub, if I believe correctly. This is for 4-wheel drive, so this spacer is removable. You're gonna take a pry bar and basically jam it into the lug studs. That way, when you're turning this nut, the hub isn't wanting to rotate on you, and then you just grab 2 wrenches, stack them, and it breaks loose. Undo all of these and we'll continue. nuts removed, should be able to separate the wheel spacer from the hub. And that looks exactly like mine, so we will commence the flip-flop. It's also important to keep in mind, if you go with aftermarket wheels, these lug nuts that you can buy at just about any auto parts store may not fit, so you'll have to get some special lug nuts in order to fit whatever size wheel you're getting, and the factory lug nuts will not work, so keep that. Always tighten your lug nuts in a crisscross pattern. That will ensure that the mating surface is true and even, and you won't have any issues with them holding torque. Of course, I'm just doing this as a little science experiment for y'all, but of course you would torque the inner lug nuts on a dually application if you were to take the tires off, or this extension hub off, and then you would also torque the outside. But I'm just putting 4 of them on for my sanity's sake, because I do have to swap this back once I'm done with it. Alright, so now that the fronts are swapped, now it's time to do the rear. I'll let your imagination run wild for a minute. We'll do a walk around, but I'll pull you in once we get the rear tires off. now that I've got the wheels off of both my wife's and my truck, I want to show you guys something. So the dually factory rear axles, this does not exist on the single wheel axles. This is your whole hub, and you can see that it's about 1.5 inches or an inch extended from the brake drum. On a single wheel application, you would not have this extension, and that is an entire hub, and it makes the axle, the full axle length, wider. This axle shaft is longer, this hub is significantly longer, and if you tried to replace this hub with a single wheel hub, you would also have to grab the axle shafts. But swapping from a single wheel to a dually, you're better off just getting a whole axle. Swapping from a dually to a single wheel, those wheels will just bolt right up, as you can see over on my truck where those wheels were. Same deal. It's still got the factory hub, factory drum, and I did not put any sort of spacer on it. I did not try to shrink it at all. You just bolt your single wheels up to the dually axle. There's no modification from going dually to single as far as the rear axle goes, but there is or has to be some modification going from a single to a dually application, whether you use a spacer of some sort to get the wheel away from the brake drum or extend the axle out. Another difference, and an obvious difference, is the beds. See, this is called, on my pickup, this is called a fleet side bed. And you can see over here on my wife's truck, this is a dually bed. And what they do for the dually bed is they cut out this entire portion where your fender flare would go out of the dually bed to make room for both wheels going up and down. And they put on the dually skirt in order to extend the fender out. You can see, let me get a light here. Okay, so this is where the bed ends, and you can see that they basically got rid of everything in order to have some sort of fender flare, or I'm sorry, the actual bed, yeah, it's right here, and they just lop all of that out in order to extend from here out for the dually fender. You can see on my fleet side, all of it is still nice and intact. You can see that split isn't as ridiculous. Now that's not to say that you couldn't put a fender flare in, like, over the like take the dually fender off and put a fender flare over it, but you don't necessarily have anything to bolt the fender to unless you basically tech screw it into the side of your bed, which is fine. If that works for you, then by all means go ahead. I just don't like doing that personally, so one day when I go to swap my truck back to a dually, I will have to be searching for a new bed because the wife's truck is staying a dually. So I'm going to put those other tires on, and then we're going to do a walk around. So let's go. so the wheels are on, and I'm just gonna give you guys a sneak peek before I call the wife out. I'm not gonna take it off the jack stands because I gotta put everything back on the ground, but you know, if it had a dually bed on it, it wouldn't look too bad. But the wife's truck over here looking thick as hell. Neighbors on the four-wheelers, dogs barking all the time. But oh my goodness. You see, if I like the stock ride height with big wheels and tires, but there would be absolutely no way that this truck would have any turning radius with worn out 35s on it. So if I could swap the beds right now, oh my god, this truck would look really sweet, and my truck would look like it skipped leg day as it does right now. But yeah, that was fun. So here's the other side. Comment below if you think I should swap my truck back to a dually. I'm gonna do whatever fancies me anyways, but I'm kind of curious to see y'all's opinions. But oh boy, she caught me. Hi, sweetie.
It'll take him forever.
You swap, I see 8, 10 tires. What you think?
I don't want to share my opinion because ain't no one gonna like it.
Why?
I would keep my truck like that.
What? See, I was just telling him, like, I like the stock ride height with the big wheels and tires, but there's absolutely no way, as it sits right now, that you would have any turning radius with the 35s. So I would have to do what I did on my truck and hack the bumper and the fenders. And this mofo, man, Jesus. You would keep your truck like that?
Oh yeah, just like that.
Just like that?
Yeah.
Dually bed and all?
Yep.
Why?
Because it looks cool.
Have you seen it from the front profile at all?
No.
The front looks great.
It looks funky, but I would still keep it.
I would swap beds and get rid of my fender flare. Like, if we swapped beds, I would get rid of the fender flares on my truck and just put this bed on my wife's, and then I would swap my bed over onto mine, and mine wouldn't look as goofy.
No, I think with 2-inch spacers on the rear would look cool.
2-inch spacers
On the rear.
of yours?
Yeah. I said no one's gonna like my opinion.
So that was fun. I want to try and make my Wednesday videos more or less entertaining, while also answering you guys' comments. So I'll save the funny videos for like Wednesday. But
your truck looks like a race truck, like
my truck looks like it needs some more rubber. If the tires were the same size and they were all like 35s and I had a dually bed on it, I think it would look great.
it just looks like it skipped leg day.
Right. Your truck, on the other hand, like, if you put a single wheel bed on it, it would really look like a stanced version, or a lowered stance version of mine, which would be friggin' sweet.
Yeah.
But, well, yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this episode. I've got to swap everything back around. But any questions, comments, concerns? So just to recap the whole swapping a dually to a single wheel, or swapping a factory single wheel to a dually. To swap a dually to a single wheel, all you need is a fleet side bed or fender flares if you want to go that route. 2-inch wheel spacers on each side of the steer axle, and then a good set of single wheels and tires. To to swap from a single wheel to a dually. If it's a factory single wheel, you got to figure out the rear axle, whether you want to try wheel spacers or just get a whole rear axle. You need the 4-inch wheel spacers for the steer axle if you want to run the dually wheels, and a new bed or the bed sides. But thank you all so much for watching. Any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comments below. If I missed anything, please let me know. And we will catch you legends in the next one. Take care.